So guys, today we're going to be doing an introduction to bushcraft. And in this series, essentially what I'm going to be doing is taking my friend who has very little experience, actually no experience with bushcrafting, and essentially teaching her how to bushcraft. And at the same time, teaching you guys the very basics and fundamentals for a great foundation in learning how to properly bushcraft. So in this first video, before I get you guys all confused with how to do things and before starting fires and all the fun stuff, we're going to be going over the essential gear to carry when bushcrafting. So now let's move over there, but before we do that, please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe if you're not already and you want to see more of this awesomeness all around. Anyways guys, let's move over to all the equipment so we can talk about it. So guys, the first part of this 9-piece kit is the belt knife. Now keep in mind, the actual specifics to this belt knife might change. Like it might actually end up being my Nalgene M38, or it might be another knife in particular, but this is just a placeholder for the belt knife and kind of what I would personally choose. But anyways, this is, in case for anyone that's wondering what this knife is, an Ambush Knives Alpha in 3V. But essentially why I think this is a good belt knife is it meets a lot of the requirements for what I think go into making a great belt knife. So the first of them is the first real requirement for a solid heavy-duty belt knife, and keep in mind belt knives are generally going to be the jack of all trades with your bushcrafting tasks. They're going to be doing most of what you need to do in a bushcrafting situation. So the first important thing is that you have a long enough knife, especially since we're running a companion knife here. Having a longer knife is very important, but even if you don't run the companion knife, a belt knife should be anywhere from 9 inches to 11 inches in overall length. This one here is 10.5 inches in overall length, and I really like that size. Personally, I try and go for the slightly larger side of that and when choosing a belt knife, but anywhere from a 9-inch to 11-inch in overall length is pretty good. Now granted, you don't want to go too big because going past 11 inches gets you more into the chopper territory, and choppers can be really hard to use as a right and proper belt knife for a bushcraft setup. So the next part for a belt knife is that it should be pretty thick. This one is around 3/16 of an inch thick, so it is on the thicker side, and it can be around 1/8 of an inch thick to 3/16. I preferably prefer 3/16 because once again, this is a knife that you're going to be doing a lot of batoning and heavy duty work with. So having a knife that's actually going to be able to be stout and hold up to the abuse that you're going to throw at it is very important. The next thing is that it's going to really need to be made out of a good steel, because if you can at all help this, because this is going to be your jack of all trades knife, that means that it's going to be used a lot or very frequently. So it needs to have a good edge on it so that it will continue to perform for you and serve you. So of course, like I said, this one's a 3V, CPM 3V, and it's a very great steel. Obviously, most beginners won't be able to choose something like this, but this is a very good option. So the next part is that it does need to be what I like to say bush competent. And what I mean by this is there are some knives out there that are even suggested as bushcrafting knives that are really tactical and they have nice points to them and they look like great fighting utility knives. And there's nothing wrong with a fighting utility knife. But for bushcraft, you want something that, like I said, I like to think of as bush competent. Now, what I mean by that is primarily that your edge is going to be pretty flat around here. There's not going to be any wild recurves or anything crazy like that, because if you have a recurve, especially out in the field, it's going to be very hard to maintain that recurve. And secondly, you don't want anything that has a very weak or fragile point to it, because those can easily snap off. And once again, while bushcrafting, I've snapped quite a few tips on bushcraft knives, so it's very important that you have a nice stout tip, especially on your belt knife, because this is going to be the heavy duty main user. The next thing that you should have is a nice, and hopefully you guys can see this, a nice wide belly, and this is going to help or assist you very well when you're doing bow drill divots, or whenever you just have to drill a kind of divot hole into anything at all. And so I really like to have a nice wide belly on, it's kind of, in my mind, what a bush competent tool is something that has those types of things. Another thing, of course, that adds to bush competency, in my opinion, is being very ergonomic. If this is your main driver type of knife, this is a knife that you're going to be using a lot, and so you want it to be comfortable to be held for hours and hours and hours. So anyways, that's the basics to having a really great belt knife. Sorry for the lighting, guys. Today is a little bit of a weird day. Like, sometimes it gets really cloudy and other times it gets really bright. But anyways, hopefully the lighting isn't too bad. So the next piece is the saw. And the saw, there's not too much to talk about with the saw or how to choose the right saw, but the reason why I want to know, the reason why I did choose a saw, and this was something that I thought about long and hard, between an axe and the reason why I chose the saw over an axe is there's actually a handful of reasons. One, the saw is, of course, and once again, this is geared toward beginners and people who don't have a great deal of experience. So the saw is a lot easier to use when doing things like notching or even just basic, firewood processing. The saw is safer to use and it's easier to use. Another thing is the maintenance on these are very low. Unlike with an axe that has like a wooden handle, you have to make sure the wooden handle is intact and okay, and you have to worry about it being cracked. Another thing you have to watch out for is the edge retention of your axe. Make sure it stays sharp. Of course, these do dull as well, but it's a lot harder. And you don't have to worry about driving this into like a pile of rocks and damaging your edge permanently. These are far easier to maintain. Not to mention that these are also far smaller, at least in their folded. Most saws fold, and in their folded condition, they're a lot smaller in comparison to like the different capacity levels. Like, this is about as capable as a boy's axe. For its size, it's very good. Another great part to this is it's also lightweight and it's also significantly cheaper. Things like my GBA, I love them, but they were around $150, and these you can get for $50. So that means I could have got 3 of these for the price of my 1 GBA. So I think for beginners, it's a lot better, especially a folding saw. I think it's far better to go with than some type of axe. And I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash. I know there's this one subscriber of mine that really wants my GBA. This does not mean I'm giving up my GBA. I still love axes and personally use axes a lot. I just think they're more advanced. And to that one subscriber, no, you cannot have my GBA. I'm not selling it. But anyways, ultimately, I think saws are better for beginners, and that's why I chose the saw for this particular series. So the next part is partially optional, and that is the companion knife. Now, I say companion knife instead of neck knife. This just happens to be a neck knife. Some other great companion knives are things like this Mora Eldris is a great one. And by the way, I totally forgot to mention, that was a silky big boy saw, and very great saw. I'll have links in the description below where you can get all this stuff on Amazon. But anyways, this is the Mora Eldris. Other recommendations would be things like the SE Izula or Izula 2, especially with micarta handles. Those make great companion knives along with this one. Other great companion knives can be some types of folders, but essentially what a companion knife is meant to do is be that small, light-duty knife that goes into the places where your large knife can't. And there are definitely crafting places or times that my crafting, my Alpha just could not get into because it had too thick of a blade and it was too large of a knife. So I used the Mora Eldris to go in there and clean up different things with crafts. Another great place where the Mora Eldris excels is in dressing and skinning of game animals. You can definitely do that with the larger belt knife, but if at all, I really prefer to use a very small, lightweight, maneuverable knife for dressing game animals. And so once again, you don't need to have a companion knife to have success bushcrafting, but if you do get a companion knife such as this Mora Eldris or an SE Izula, you'll really like the capacity and capability of having a really small knife that does very fine-tuned work. So that is the next part to this. So the next part is cooking gear. You can definitely go crazy with cooking gear and have a lot of different types of cooking gear and, really cool kettles and pots and pans. But I wanted to keep this, once again, this is geared toward basic bushcrafting. So I wanted to keep this very basic. So all I run here, and this is primarily actually what I run most of the time, but is just a stainless steel Nalgene water bottle and then a GSI Glacier stainless steel cup. And with these two things, you can do pretty much 90% of what you have to do as in a bushcrafting role, whether it's boiling and purifying water, cooking some light meals, definitely making coffee. You can do all of that with this setup very well. So for this, I'm keeping it very basic, just a Nalgene stainless steel water bottle and a GSI Glacier stainless steel cup. And once again, very basic, but yet if you know how to use it, very capable pair. So the next thing is a ferro rod, and for this I chose this ferro rod specifically because lighters and matches, pretty much anyone can start a fire with those two things. But with ferro rods, what I really like is they begin to teach you the basics of how to prep for a fire and how to prepare your tinder so that it will go up easier. And when you learn to do that, when you go back to using things like lighters or matches, you'll have far greater success with them. Or when you want to begin to go into even more primitive types of fire making, things like bow drills or maybe even flint and steel, you'll have far greater success because you'll begin to learn the basics of what it takes to do true fire. As for this, I just chose a really basic Light My Fire 2.0 Army ferro rod. It's a great stout ferro rod. Another awesome thing about ferro rods and learning how to use them is, of course, they are weather resistant, so you can drop it in a lake and pick it up and you can reuse it. They're completely or they are very hard to overall render incapable in use. So anyways, that is the primary fire lighting method for this video, or for this series. So the next part is shelter, I believe it is, and for this is something that you guys that you guys will have to modify on your own, in the fact of like what tarp you want to go with. For this video series, I'm going to be using my UGQ Winter Dream 11, and that's what this tarp is. And we're going to be doing hopefully two different types of shelters where we actually build a shelter in the woods, out of the woods. But to begin to teach the basics of shelter craft, I want to begin with tarps, and I kind of wish I learned how to build shelters first with tarps. But it's really important, and what I really like about learning first to build shelters with tarps is it teaches you to visualize what you want a shelter to look like, and then making that a reality. And so we're going to be starting off with tarps. Another thing is tarps are really great because they give you a surefire, or at least pretty surefire, method of shelter craft. And once again, if you're a beginner, you want to make sure that you can actually, especially if you plan to do something like an overnighter, you want to make sure that you can actually have a shelter at the end of the night. And so that's what I really like about tarps. So we're going to go over a few different types of tarp shelters and probably build some shelters out here in the woods, out of the woods, but we're going to start off with tarps. Anyways, like I was saying, this tarp in particular is the Underground Quilt Company Winter Dream 11. So the next part is Paracord, and I chose Paracord because one, I have a ton of it, and two, it's really great. But another great contender to this, and something else that I do carry in the pack, is Bankline. For a long time I didn't carry it, but Bankline is pretty good. I do prefer Paracord though, because with Bankline, Bankline is just a single cord where there's no inner strands really to it, and so that's all you have. And so it's really great that it's thin, but that's all you have. It's not as multi-purposeful as Paracord, whereas with Paracord you have, of course, the inner strands and the outer shell, and of these you can make a lot of cordage, and or you can begin to cut things like the outer shell and make flies for fishing out of that stuff. So it's very, very useful. There's a million uses for Paracord, and that's why I chose Paracord over other cordage options. So lastly is the backpack, and this is something that you will want to make sure, with all this gear we just went over of having all these different things, you're going to want something to pack it. Now for me and for this video series, I'm probably going to be using, for the most part, this Camelback linchpin. This is definitely overkill for holding just these items enumerated, but I obviously have to hold camera equipment and first aid supplies and a few different things, so this pack doesn't just hold all that you guys have seen here, it holds a bit of other stuff, and so obviously I have to have a bigger backpack to accommodate for all the extra stuff that I carry aside from this. But anyways, guys, that is the basics to this, or those are the 9 essential pieces for making a great solid foundation for bushcrafting gear. Hopefully you enjoyed that nice look at the 9 essential pieces of bushcrafting gear to have. These are pretty much the absolute foundation for doing most, if not all, of what bushcrafters do. Of course, another great addition, or 10th edition, would be an axe, but once again, for beginning off, you don't really need an axe for most of what we're going to be doing. So anyways, guys, hope you like this look, and that's it for now. I'm out.